Hello, my name is Erica Tankus, and today I will be answering the 4 video prompt questions to a video reflection and analysis. Now, the first question involves the top 3 perceptual distortions so that employees would be most likely affected by when forming perceptions of a new manager. And my answer to this first prompt is that the top 3 perceptual distortions of that employees are most likely to be affected by when forming perceptions of a new manager are stereotyping, which is the tendency to assign an individual to a group or a category, and nonetheless then attributing that person the qualities believed to be true of that group or that category. And an example of stereotyping that has to do with a new manager is that employees might have preconceived notions about new managers in general based on any past experiences and based on age, gender, the new manager's former company, etc. And they might assume that this new manager will be rigid or inexperienced or micromanaging, or at least 2 of those simply because of those, or all 3 of those simply because they fit like a certain stereotype that assigns people a quality that describes them as rigid, inexperienced, and micromanaging, or at least 1 or 2 of them. This and it can affect an employee's initial interactions and expectations in a negative way that makes it difficult to see the new manager for who they actually are. The second is the halo effect, which occurs when a single prominent positive trait or a single prominent positive characteristic of a person and influences the overall perception of that said person. An example of the halo effect is that a new manager might have a charming personality or come from a prestigious company, or might have a charming personality and come from a prestigious company. And so an employee might then assume, based on that positive trait or those positive traits, that this new manager is highly competent, fair, and is also an excellent leader, even without any evidence of those qualities. The halo effect also has an opposite counterpart, which is called the horns effect. And similarly to the halo effect, the horns effect occurs when one negative trait leads to an overall negative judgment, such as, for example, when someone comes from a difficult background. Let's say they grew up in the slums and grew up in poverty, or they grew up in poverty and poverty is perceived as a negative thing, and somebody might believe that this person is person did some negative things that led them to being poor, like doing drugs, for example, ample, ample, ample. But sometimes the halo effects and horns effects have proved to be wrong, and proved to be wrong or false, like false hope and hope, such as, for example, when that new manager who was believed to be highly competent and fair and an excellent leader might turn out to actually be not as competent, or be not as competent, or not having good leadership skills, and that person who was poor and believed to have done some negative things, like doing drugs that led them to being poor, might actually turn out to not be a drug addict and is instead a hardworking person who hardworking person, a hardworking person. Thirdly is selective perception, which is the tendency to selectively interpret what we see based on our own interests, background, experience, attitudes, etc. And one example is when a new manager arrives, an employee might pay attention only to the information that confirms their existing biases. And if an employee is already nervous about a new manager, then that employee might focus on any small missteps and or critical comments, while ignoring positive actions and helpful feedback. Thus giving the employee a consistent, albeit distorted view of that new manager, and allowing the employee to maintain that consistent, albeit distorted view of that new manager. The second prompt question asks about what I could do in a difficult work situation to protect myself from falling prey to fundamental attribution error. Well, to answer that question, I'll first need to define fundamental attribution error, or also noticed by its acronym as FAE. FAE is the tendency to overemphasize internal or dispositional factors such as personality traits or attitudes, and underemphasize external or situational factors when explaining other people's behavior. One example of FAE is when a coworker misses a deadline and it affects a person affected by FAE would assume that make an assumption that as in a negative assumption that the coworker is lazy and unorganized, instead of that person considering that the coworker might be dealing with a family emergency or a heavy workload. Luckily, people can protect themselves from FAE and falling prey to it, especially in difficult work situations, by pausing and reflecting, practicing empathy and perspective taking, and seeking information. And about pause and reflect, before jumping to conclusions, you should take a moment to pause and consider alternative explanations. When practicing empathy and perspective taking, you should make a deliberate effort to put yourself in another person's shoes, and consider their circumstances, responsibilities, and pressures, and etc. that they might be facing. And when seeking information, You should ask questions instead of making assumptions. And open communication can help provide information needed to understand the full picture. Now for prompt number 3, prompt number 3 is about praise. It involves praise, which can be used by managers as a type of positive reinforcement. And it says to list at least 3 additional positive reinforcements that are or can be used in the workplace. I would say that 3 additional positive reinforcements that can be used in the workplace would be, other than praise, would be tangible rewards, which can include bonuses, gift cards, company merchandise, extra time off, etc. And nonetheless provide a concrete physical acknowledgement of an employee's performance and can be a powerful motivator, especially when they're directly linked to specific achievements. The second is professional development opportunities, which include offering training, workshops, and tuition reimbursement, and nonetheless shows employees that a company is invested in its growth, and thus reinforces the good work of employees by signaling that the employees are valued, and that the company sees a future for its employees. And the third and final one is flexible work arrangements, which involves giving employees the option of flexible hours or remote work, or both flexible hours and remote work, as a reward for meeting goals. And thus flexible work arrangements can be highly motivating, as they provide a tangible benefit that improves work-life balance while also signaling trust and autonomy. Now, it says that out of all the additional reinforcements that I listed, it asks which reinforcement that I listed do I find the most personally motivating, and why? Well, I would say all 3 of them. I would say that all 3 of them, tangible rewards, professional development opportunities, and flexible work arrangements, are equally the most personally motivating, because as they help to motivate employees in their own special ways, and when put together, and putting them together helps a company to thrive, putting them together is best to help a company thrive, and motivate employees into helping the company grow and thrive and succeed. But if I could only choose one, I would say flexible work arrangements, because as a lot of people, because there are people who prefer to just work from home because they find it easier, and some have a busy life, or medical conditions that require them to work from home, or from home. Now, the fourth and final prompt involves where I join a company where managers regularly reprimand their direct reports in front of others, play favorites, and encourage coworkers to report one another for making even the smallest of mistakes. And it says, asked that based on Bandura's social cognitive theory, what sort of company culture is likely to spring from those negative practices, and how would a new employee seek to get ahead at such a company, and to what extent would efforts to succeed in this culture directly benefit that company's shareholders? It says, based on Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory, I'd say that the company culture is likely to become a company culture of fear, competition, and distrust. Us, as us, especially because Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory posits that people learn by observing others and noting consequences, such as rewards or punishments, of their behavior. And managers regularly reprimanding direct reports in front of others, playing favorites, and encouraging reporting small mistakes can create a model of behavior for employees to shape the company culture into one of fear, competition, and distrust, especially through us. A new employee would seek to get ahead into such company culture, actually, as this, by emulating the rewarded behaviors that they see, which might involve undermining peers by reporting coworkers for small mistakes to gain favor with the manager, ingratiating themselves with management by engaging in suck-up behavior to become one of the favorites, and avoiding risk and collaboration by not taking initiative or working closely with others for fear of being blamed for even the smallest of mistakes. So the efforts to succeed in this culture would have a minimal to no direct benefit for the company's shareholders, as they would be detrimental because cultures of distrust and fear stifle innovation, discourage collaboration, and lead to high employee turnover. And while individual employees might temporarily get ahead through these toxic behaviors, the company as a whole is destined to suffer from the lack of creativity, the low morale, and the decline in productivity caused by the lack of creativity and the low morale and the environment of fear, competition, and distrust. And thus all those negative things would ultimately harm the long-term profitability and success of the company and lead that company to its well-deserved demise. And that's it for my video assignment. Thanks for watching!